"You're too fat to live," doctor said. Mountain Man roared, "Then I'll teach you how to live." "You're too fat to live," the doctor sneered, his voice cutting sharper than any scalpel. Ophelia Ophi Fairchild sat frozen in the stiff wooden chair of Dr. Harrison Grimwald's office in Boston, her hands clutching her shawl as though it could shield her from the cruelty spilling from his lips. She had come seeking hope, answers for the crushing tightness in her chest and the wheezing that left her sleepless at night. Instead, she was handed a death sentence. "Your heart won't last 6 months," Grimwald declared coldly, scribbling something useless onto his ledger. "A year, perhaps, if you're fortunate. You're simply too heavy for life itself. Go home. Prepare yourself. There is nothing more to be done." The words slammed into Ophi harder than any blow. She tried to speak, to ask if there was no other treatment, no remedy at all. But the doctor had already turned away, dismissed, cast off, as though she were not a living, breathing woman, but a burden, a mistake of flesh. She stumbled out into the rain-slick streets, her tears mingling with the drizzle that streaked down her cheeks. Carriages rattled past, indifferent, while passers-by cast sidelong glances at the sobbing, heavy-set woman clinging to a shuttered shop-front. "Am I truly too fat to live?" she whispered into the storm. "Is this the worth of my life, to be told to wait for death?" And then a roar, sudden and thunderous, split the rain-soaked air. "Who dares say you are too fat to live?" The voice was raw, feral, and brimming with fury. "Then I will teach you how to live." Ophi turned, eyes wide, and saw him, a towering mountain of a man, silver hair plastered to his shoulders by the rain, eyes blazing with defiance against the cruelty of the world. The streets of Boston bustled with evening carriages and umbrellas, but to Ophi Fairchild the city felt emptier than ever. Each step along the cobblestones was heavy, not only from the weight she carried on her frame, but from the doctor's words pressing down like a coffin lid. At 31, Ophi had lived her entire life under the shadow of whispers. "Too large for society," the women muttered when she passed. "Unmarriageable," the men scoffed, as if her worth began and ended with her waistline. Yet she had endured, working as a seamstress, helping her widowed mother, clinging to faith that kindness and usefulness could carve a place for her in the world. But tonight, with Grimwald's verdict echoing in her ears, even that fragile thread of hope seemed severed. She wrapped her shawl tighter, as if it could hide her from the stares of strangers who seemed to agree with the doctor's pronouncement. Too fat to live. She sank onto the stone steps of a shuttered bakery, chest heaving, sobs shaking her. The rain plastered her hair against her cheeks, chilling her to the bone, and then she heard it again, that booming voice that seemed to rattle the windows of the shops around her. Who dares say such blasphemy against life itself? Through the curtain of rain emerged a giant, Titan Thai life-bringer, nearly 3 meters tall, his shoulders broad as a barn door, his weathered skin streaked with silver hair and years of sun and storm. He carried no umbrella, no cityman's coat, only a rough wool cloak soaked through, yet he stood as if the elements bowed to him. Ophi's breath caught. This was no physician, no polished gentleman. He was raw nature itself, a mountain that had stepped into the streets of Boston. "Sir, she stammered, unsure whether to fear him or trust him. He knelt, his great frame lowering until his piercing eyes met hers. "I heard your cry against the storm. Tell me, who dared tell you your life has no worth?" Her lips trembled. "The doctor. He said my heart will fail, that I have half a year, perhaps a year at most, that I should prepare for death. Titan's expression darkened into a thundercloud. Then that doctor knows nothing of life. His voice rolled like distant thunder. No flesh, no size, no shape decides whether a soul deserves to live. Only the spirit does, and yours still burns. Ophi shook her head, tears mixing with rain. You don't understand. They've all said it. My family hides me away. The neighbors mock me. And now even science. Her voice cracked. Even medicine says I am doomed. Titan reached out, his massive hand surprisingly gentle as it brushed away the wet strands clinging to her forehead. I have seen warriors pierced with bullets who survived because they willed it. I have seen children wasting away who flourished with love and herbs. And I have seen men, healthy in body, die because they had no hope left. Life is not measured by a physician's scrawl. It is measured by the fire in the heart. His words struck something inside her, a spark buried beneath years of ridicule and shame. Still, she hesitated. And you, why do you care? You don't know me. To you I must look. Stop. Titan's voice was firm but kind. I see only a woman drowning in sorrow who deserves a hand to pull her out. If you let me, I will teach you to breathe again, to walk with strength, to live, not merely to survive. The rain slowed, as if even the heavens were listening. Ophi sat in silence, her heart pounding with something new, not despair, but the faintest whisper of possibility. For the first time since leaving the doctor's office, she looked up and saw not her death sentence, but a path she had never imagined. Boston's cobblestone streets faded behind them, swallowed by the night. Titan's long stride seemed tireless, while Ophi stumbled at his side, her soaked dress clinging heavily to her frame. Each step was a battle. Her breath came ragged, her chest tight, from years of strain. I can't, she gasped after only a few blocks. Titan slowed immediately. His hand, broad and steady, supported her elbow. You can, but not fast, not far, not yet. Healing begins with small steps. His words, so unlike the impatient scold she had heard all her life, steadied her trembling knees. They moved together at her pace, Titan shielding her from the curious glances of late-night passers-by. To them, she had always been a spectacle, but under his looming presence, she felt for once protected rather than exposed. By dawn, they reached the city's edge, where brick gave way to dirt road and pine scent replaced the stench of smoke. The rain had ceased, leaving the world washed clean. Ophi leaned heavily on Titan's arm, her shoes ruined, her dress tattered. Yet her heart beat with something strange. Hope? Fear? Both at once. You should go back, she whispered, her voice hoarse. I'm only slowing you down. Titan looked down at her, his eyes fierce with conviction. Do you think a river complains because it bends around a stone? No, it flows, carrying the stone with it. That is what I will do for you. He lifted her easily into his arms before she could protest. She had expected mockery, or at least a grunt of effort. Instead, his expression remained calm, almost reverent, as if carrying her was no burden at all. You'll grow stronger, he promised as they entered the forest path. But until then, I will lend you my strength. Days blurred together. The journey to Healing Ridge was not short. Each morning Titan rose before dawn to brew a tonic from roots he foraged, coaxing Ophi to sip. It eased her breathing, soothed her aching joints. He fashioned a walking stick from hickory, teaching her to lean less on him and more on her own balance. At night, he built fires beneath towering pines. Ophi would sit wrapped in blankets while Titan stirred broth in a blackened pot, the aroma of herbs filling the cold air. "I haven't eaten like this since I can't remember," she confessed one evening, cradling the wooden bowl he handed her. "Food is not only for the body," Titan said, watching her with quiet satisfaction. "It is medicine for the spirit. Each bite reminds you you are alive." And alive she felt, though the journey tested her. There were moments when her legs gave out, when old shame returned like a shadow whispering, "You are too heavy, too weak, too broken." But then she would see Titan walking ahead, steady as an oak, pausing only to wait for her, never once urging her faster. His silence was not judgment, but patience, and in that patience she discovered her own grit. One afternoon, as they crossed a narrow wooden bridge over a rushing stream, Ophi froze. The water roared beneath them, wild and merciless. Her legs shook. "I can't," she whispered, clutching the railing. Titan stepped back onto the bridge, his hand covering hers. "The water below cannot hurt you," he said softly. "But fear can. Breathe with me, one step at a time." Together they crossed. On the far side, Ophi wept, not from fear, but from triumph. Titan wrapped his cloak around her shoulders, his voice low. "Every fear conquered is another stone lifted from your heart. Soon you will walk freer than you ever dreamed." As the days passed, the forest grew denser, the air sharper. Healing Ridge loomed in the distance, a range of jagged peaks kissed by morning mist. To Ophi, it looked both terrifying and majestic, like the final test between her and life itself. One evening, as they camped on a plateau overlooking the valley, she asked in a trembling voice, "Why me? Why did you choose to help me when so many others turned away?" Titan's gaze lingered on the horizon. "Because I saw a woman who refused to die even when told she must. That spark is rare, and I will not let the world snuff it out." His words wrapped around her like the blanket on her shoulders, warming her in ways the fire could not. For the first time in years, Ophi dared to imagine a future, one where she was not a burden, not a curse, not too fat to live, but a woman walking her own path. And with Titan at her side, the path led upward toward Healing Ridge. The path to Healing Ridge ended at a clearing where the forest broke open to reveal Titan's home. It was no crude shelter, but a sprawling cabin of timber and stone built into the mountain itself. Smoke curled gently from its chimney, and the scent of pine mixed with wood smoke carried on the air. For Ophi, who had known only cramped boarding houses and sterile doctors' offices, it felt like a kingdom carved from the wilderness. Titan carried her up the final steps, though she protested weakly. He set her down before the wide oak door, pressing her hand against its rough surface. "This is your door now, too. Step inside." The cabin's warmth embraced her immediately. A great stone fireplace blazed at the far wall, flames dancing over iron pots and bundles of drying herbs hung from beams. The floor creaked beneath her weight, but not in judgment, only in welcome. Shelves lined with jars of dried roots, rows of handmade tools, and stacks of wool blankets told her this was not just a house, but a place where life was tended carefully. "You built this?" she whispered, eyes wide. "Every beam, every nail," Titan answered. "I made it for healing. Now it is for you, too." He guided her to a chair by the fire, wrapping a fur across her shoulders. She sank into it, exhaustion flooding her limbs, but for the first time in years, Safety settled over her like a second skin. The days that followed unfolded gently, like petals of a long-closed flower. Titan set about weaving structure into her life, nothing forced, nothing rushed, but steady as the rising sun. Mornings began with steam from a clay mug of herbal tea, its bitterness softened by honey. Titan would place it in her hands without a word, watching until her first sip brought warmth to her cheeks. "Good," he'd murmur, satisfied. Breakfasts were simple but filling, oats sweetened with berries, eggs fried over the hearth. Always Titan served her first, sliding the wooden bowl across the table before touching his own. When she tried to insist he eat first, his deep voice rumbled, "A healer's work is to nourish before he feeds himself." It was such a small act, yet Ophi's chest tightened each time. No one had ever placed her before themselves, not family, not doctors, not the world. After meals, Titan encouraged her to walk the cabin's length, then its porch, then the garden path lined with late autumn cabbages and sage. He did not measure her progress with harsh judgment, but with quiet pride. "Another step is another victory," he'd say. And when she faltered, he was simply there, steadying her elbow, lending strength without comment. The afternoons belonged to learning. Titan showed her the names of herbs: comfrey for bones, yarrow for wounds, peppermint for breath. He crushed leaves between his fingers, urging her to smell, to know. Her curiosity bloomed where despair had once lived. "You have a healer's mind," he told her one day as she carefully arranged jars on a shelf. "You remember not just the names, but the feel of each leaf. That is rare." She blushed, unused to praise. "I've only ever been told what I couldn't do." "Then let me be the first to tell you what you can." Evening softened into a rhythm of firelight and conversation. Titan, though a man of few words, shared fragments of his past, how he had once been a soldier, then a wanderer, until he chose to devote his life to healing rather than destruction. Ophi listened, rapt, her own story spilling out in return, the loneliness of being mocked, the hopelessness of hearing her body named as a curse. "Do you still believe their words?" Titan asked one night, his gaze steady. "I want to stop," she admitted, "but the echoes are loud." "Then we will silence them together," he promised. His hand, massive and scarred, rested gently atop hers. There were countless moments like that, small threads weaving into a tapestry of something greater. Titan carving a sturdy stool so she could reach the shelves without strain. Ophi surprising him by baking a loaf of bread in the hearth oven, its crust imperfect but golden. His laughter at the first bite, deep, rolling, rare, warmed her more than the fire. Bit by bit, the cabin ceased to feel like his home and became theirs. Yet the tenderness growing between them carried its own weight. Ophi often caught Titan watching her, not with pity, but with something deeper, something she hardly dared name. When she looked away, her pulse quickened. Could it be love? One evening, as the wind howled outside and snow began to fall, Titan placed another log on the fire. The flames leapt, casting shadows across his broad shoulders. He turned to her, hesitation in his eyes, uncharacteristic of his mighty form. "You are safe here," he said quietly, almost reverently. "This is your home, if you will have it." Tears filled Ophi's eyes, spilling before she could stop them, not because of sorrow, but because no one had ever offered her a home, a place of belonging. She whispered through trembling lips, "Then this is where I want to stay." Titan inclined his head, but his hand lingered on hers longer than before. In the glow of the fire, Ophi felt the walls around her heart cracking, not with fear, but with the first fragile shoots of love. The cabin was not just a shelter on Healing Ridge. It was the birthplace of a new life, where a woman once told she was too fat to live began to learn not only how to survive, but how to be cherished. For weeks, life at the cabin unfolded with a rhythm so gentle that Ophi almost forgot the city existed. Snow blanketed the garden, pine smoke curled from the chimney, and Titan's presence anchored her days. Yet beneath the peace, shadows lingered, whispers of the past neither could silence forever. It began with a letter. One morning, Titan returned from the trading post in the valley below, a rare trip he made only when absolutely necessary. He set a folded envelope on the table before her, his jaw tight. "It's addressed to you," he said. Ophi's hands trembled as she broke the seal. The handwriting was her brother's. "You have shamed the family enough. Word has spread that you're hiding in the mountains with some savage who calls himself a healer. Do not think you can disgrace us further. The Fairchild name will not be dragged into your madness. If you care at all for us, stay gone and silent." Her vision blurred. "Even my own blood wants me erased," she whispered. Titan's fist clenched on the table, the wood groaning under his strength. "Your worth is not theirs to decide." But the letter awakened old pain. Ophi retreated into herself, doubting whether she had the right to stay in the cabin, to belong here at all. She avoided Titan's gaze, her steps slower, her laughter fading. At the same time, Titan faced his own haunting. Travelers brought news. Dr. Grimwald, furious that his diagnosis had been proven false, was stirring trouble. He called Titan a fraud, a danger to the sick, a charlatan who preyed on the desperate. Grimwald had influence in the city, and his words carried weight. "He's gathering men," one trader warned Titan. "Lawmen, inspectors. Says he'll drag you down for illegal practice and expose your mountain as a den of lies." Titan said nothing at first, but that night Ophi found him outside, sharpening an axe beneath the moonlight. His face was stone, his eyes storm. "You're preparing for them," she realized. "I won't let them take what we've built," he said. "I've fought wars before. I can fight this one." "But what if fighting is what they want?" she whispered. "What if they twist every action into proof of their lies?" Titan's silence was heavy. He had always been a man of action, of defiance against the world's cruelty. Yet, with Ophi, he feared not only losing the battle, but losing her to despair. The conflict deepened when Ophi found a chest tucked beneath Titan's bed, old, battered, bound in leather straps. Curiosity overcame caution. Inside were relics of his past, a rusted military medal, a blood-stained journal, and a photograph of a woman and child. When Titan saw her holding it, his face darkened with grief. "That was my wife, my son." His voice broke, rough as gravel. "They died because of me." Ophi shook her head. "Because of war." "No," Titan said bitterly, "because I believed strength was enough. I fought, I killed, and while I was gone, they perished. I swore never to care again, never to love again, until you." Silence stretched. Ophi placed the photograph back into the chest and closed it gently. "You think loving me is weakness?" Titan's eyes glistened in the firelight. "I fear it will be your undoing." Her heart ached at his confession, yet in that moment she understood. Both of them carried chains, different yet the same. Hers were forged by shame and rejection, his by guilt and loss. If they were to survive, they had to break them together, but fate would not wait for them to heal at their own pace. Snow had barely melted from the pines when shouts echoed through the valley below. Ophi, standing on the porch, froze as she saw torches moving in the dusk, figures climbing the mountain path. Titan stepped outside, his massive form blocking her from view. His voice was calm, but iron-hard. "They've come." Dr. Grimwald's voice carried up the slope, shrill and venomous. "Bring out the woman! Let her prove your so-called miracles, or we'll tear this den apart and drag you both down." Ophi's pulse thundered. Fear rooted her feet, but another feeling rose beneath it. Anger. For once, she wasn't simply a patient, a burden, a shadow. She was a woman who had tasted life, love, and hope, and she would not let them be stolen again. She stepped beside Titan, her hand slipping into his. His fingers closed around hers, rough and unyielding. "They say I'm too fat to live," she called down the slope, her voice breaking but fierce. "Yet here I stand, living, breathing, stronger than I have ever been, and I will not go back to the grave they dug for me." The torches wavered. The crowd murmured. Titan's voice thundered beside hers. "If you want her, you'll have to tear her from my hands, and I promise you, this mountain will not yield easily." The battle for their new life had begun. The mountain path shook with boots and curses as Dr. Grimwald's men pushed higher, their torches flickering against the snow-darkened sky. The cabin glowed behind Titan and Ophi, its single light a fragile beacon against the storm of fury approaching. Grimwald stepped forward, his black coat flapping in the wind, his eyes burning with spite. "There she is!" he shouted, pointing at Ophi as though she were an animal. "The gluttonous fraud! You think hiding in the woods makes you holy? You are proof of his lies. Your very body is a sickness." Ophi flinched. For a heartbeat, the old shame surged, the voice that had haunted her since girlhood, but Titan's hand tightened around hers, grounding her. His voice was a roar that rolled across the slope. "Choose your next words carefully, Grimwald. One more insult, and this mountain will remember you as bones beneath the snow." The crowd shifted uneasily. Some men looked at Titan's immense frame and hesitated. Others, whipped by Grimwald's venom, raised rifles and shovels. "Arrest him!" Grimwald barked. "Bring the woman down to face proper judgment." The first man lunged. Titan moved like thunder, grabbing the torch from his hand and snapping it in two before tossing him into the snowbank. The others faltered, fear flashing in their eyes. "You'll kill us all?" Grimwald sneered. Titan's gaze blazed. "Not if you turn back, but if you lay one finger on her, yes." Behind him, Ophi's chest heaved. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then, with trembling legs, she stepped forward. "No," she said, her voice carrying down the slope. "He doesn't have to fight alone." Grimwald barked a laugh. "You? Speak?" "Yes," Ophi said, louder now, her words slicing through the cold air. "You told me I was too fat to live. You told me I should wait quietly for death. But I stand here alive because this man taught me that living is more than breathing. It's fighting for your own worth." The men shifted again. Some lowered their rifles. One muttered, "She looks stronger than before." Grimwald's face twisted with rage. "Lies! All lies! You are bewitched by that mountain brute!" Ophi's tears froze on her cheeks, but her voice did not falter. "No, I am healed by love, by patience, by hope. Things you never gave your patience. You looked at me and saw profit in my death. He looked at me and saw life. A murmur rippled through the crowd, doubt spreading like cracks in ice. Titan stepped beside her, his shadow looming over Grimwald. "You've lost, Doctor. The truth stands before them, breathing, stronger than your lies." Grimwald raised his pistol, desperation flashing. "Then the truth dies tonight." The shot rang, echoing off the cliffs. But Titan was faster. He lunged, his massive arms sweeping Ophi behind him. The bullet grazed his shoulder, tearing cloth but sparing his flesh. With a growl, he seized Grimwald's wrist and twisted until the gun clattered to the ground. "Enough!" Titan thundered. The men, shaken by the doctor's cowardice, dropped their weapons. Grimwald writhed, but Titan flung him into the snow at the crowd's feet. "You followed him for power," Titan roared. "Now see him for what he is, a coward who condemns women to die because he cannot see their strength." No one moved to help Grimwald. The torches dimmed as men turned their backs, muttering in shame. Ophi, heart racing, stepped forward. She looked down at the man who once spoke her death sentence. "You said I had 6 months. Tonight, I choose to live a lifetime." And with those words, the power of his cruelty shattered. The mountain fell quiet after the men disappeared into the dark, leaving Grimwald sprawled in the snow, stripped of his followers and his authority. Titan closed the cabin door behind them, bolting it with a beam of oak. The fire crackled, sending a wash of golden light across the rough-hewn walls. Ophi stood by the hearth, her hands trembling, not from fear, but from the release of years of shame and silence. She turned to Titan, who was binding his grazed shoulder with a strip of linen. "You took a bullet for me," she whispered. He looked up, his eyes steady as stone. "I told you, no harm will touch you while I stand. You're safe here." The words wrapped around her more securely than any blanket. For the first time, she believed them. Safe, wanted, alive. She crossed the room, lowering herself onto the bench beside him. Their shadows flickered together on the wall, merging in the firelight. "This cabin," Titan said softly, his voice gentler now, "is more than wood and stone. It is home, if you'll have it." Ophi's throat tightened. She had dreamed of belonging all her life, but never dared to hope. Now, sitting beside the man who saw her not as a burden, but as a miracle, she let the tears fall freely. "I'll have it," she said, voice breaking. "I'll have you." He pulled her into his arms, and the mountain wind howled outside, beating against the walls. But within, the fire burned, steady and bright. And though the world beyond still whispered cruelly, "Too fat, too unworthy, too wrong," in this cabin a different truth lived. The question lingered in the air like smoke. Would love be strong enough to silence the world outside? Every time I see your comments, I'm reminded how stories connect us across distances, cultures, and lives. This tale of Ophi and Titan is more than a romance. It's a reminder that no one is ever too much or too little to deserve love, hope, and a chance at life. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Share it in the comments. I promise your voice matters here. And if you still believe in love that defies shame and fear, don't go anywhere. The next story is waiting just for you.